And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. The Manafort trial. The jury will now have the case. I guess tomorrow deliberations begin. I'm predicting guilty by lunch. Look, that would be the fitting outcome. They come in for the morning, get there about 9:30, get the instructions from the judge into the jury room by 10:30-ish, noon, lunchtime. We should go to lunch. And then bang, guilty. Lock him up. And make him wear the ostrich jacket and the satin pants. That should have to happen as well. But we'll see what comes of it. Not much of a defense. But again, how do you defend? I was doing it with him, and we were cheating the hell out of everybody. Not quite sure. So I'm looking forward to that. Look, we'll see where it goes. Hoping for a guilty verdict, and then the next trial should be fun as well. So good stuff. Today, I just before, I had this whole kind of thought in my head before, like 10 minutes ago, where I said, this is where I want to go, and this is kind of the decision. And I'll talk about Elizabeth Warren's her new proposal today to fix capitalism and all of that, maybe a little bit later. But just a couple of minutes ago, I saw this story come out of Georgia. The AP has this story, and the big headline, ACL of Georgia slams plan to close many of county's polls. So it catches my attention. Turns out there is a county in Georgia, Randolph County. Evidently, they're planning on closing 7 of the 9 polling places in this one county. Like almost all of it. So 7 of the 9 polling places will be gone, including the one, the Cuthbert Middle School, where nearly 97% of the voters who use this polling place are black. Understand, this is one of the poorest counties in the state. It has a population about 61% black, more than double the statewide average. Median income is about $30,000, where the rest of the state is over $51,000. Nearly a third of the residents in this county live below the poverty line, compared to 16% statewide. And you go through all this and you go, it's a predominantly black county. It's a poor county. It's a county that, might take to an African-American woman running for governor. Is that kind of maybe possibly, is that possible, you think? And that we want to do what we can do to make sure that, they don't vote for her. And the only way to stop them from voting for her is to block their access to the polls. Now, caging probably isn't going to work because there are people fighting that. Voting while black, not going to happen because there are people fighting that. The cross-check, people are fighting back against. The voter ID, people are fighting back against. All of this stuff, there are people who are now looking out for this stuff. So what do? You just shut off the polls. So you know what? You can travel to the other side of the county to cast your ballot if you know which one to go to. Now think about this. You've lived in a neighborhood, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, however long, and you've always voted at in this case, the Cuthbert Middle School. So you were able to walk to the middle school, cast your ballot. Now they're going to move that poll to one of 2 places across the county. And the fun should be trying to get all of those other people to the right one. This is the kind of busy work that they're creating. And it got me to thinking about, I watched this video of I've never heard of this CRTV. I assume it's conservative, radical TV. I don't know. But there was a black guy on there. John Miller is his name. And he was ranting on about how white people think that black people are stupid because they can't get a photo ID. And, you know, he was making every excuse he could make of why Trump was not wrong when he said you need a photo ID to buy groceries. Evidently, according to him, he gets carded all the time buying tomatoes. I guess it has something to do with a credit card, and he's always buying liquor, and I guess he's always buying, you know, cigarettes or whatever. So that means he's going to get carded. And I'll tell you, I don't buy liquor at the grocery store. There's a liquor store for that. And, you know, I do look over 21 now, so they don't even really card me anymore. So I don't even really need it for that. But the argument was that this guy was making is that by being against the voter ID law, of which I am to a degree, by being against it, that somehow I'm racist. Somehow I think that black people are just too freaking stupid to be able to click a website link or to be able to go to the DMV. And that's not even remotely close to reality. What I am is someone who grew up in a neighborhood that wasn't on the bus line, that getting to the DMV was a major, major operation. And that if you work for a living, if you have a job, which I assume most people do, that taking a day off from work is also a hardship. And that, sorry, not everyone needs a photo ID. And I know, well, you need to get one with a bank account. Well, guess what? There are a lot of poor people in this country who don't have IDs and don't have a bank account. Because guess what? They don't have any money for it. And guess what? There aren't a lot of banks in those neighborhoods. Just kind of throwing that out there, which is why payday lending is such a huge, lucrative business in this country. Now, I'm not against the idea of people verifying who they are and where they live. When I first registered to vote, this is going back a long time ago, I remember being able to take the electric bill that had my name on it and saying, this is where I live. Because they took a whole bunch of types of identification, a whole bunch of things to verify your name and address and where you live and who you are and all of that. There was a ton of stuff. If you look at the voter ID stuff, it's very narrow. Got to have a driver's license and it better damn well be valid. I think about my grandmother who she hadn't driven in 15 years. Everybody else took her outdated photo ID except the people who allow you to vote. And you stop and you go through all this. Who are the people who don't have photo IDs? Well, they're poor people. And poor people, like it or not, generally vote for Democrats. So is it a huge reach to think that the whole purpose of this voter ID law is just to keep poor people from the polls? Yes, that's the reason. And to keep seniors. Because guess what? It wasn't going to be an easy task for my grandmother to hop on a bus, because she doesn't drive, and drive downtown to the DMV on a Tuesday afternoon to get a photo ID. And she never did. And we heard all of these cases come out. And look, we're back again to fighting over the voter ID law because Trump brought it up. And trust me, at some point we may have to show ID for groceries, or at some point they implant something in our head that allow it to be scanned. I'm sure that's coming. Or maybe they'll just tie your ID to a credit card and they're going to charge us to vote. Because I'm thinking of all the schemes and all the ways that they can suppress or steal the right for people to vote, especially poor people. And it's this county. I look at this and they go, yeah, duh. You know, this is what happens all across the country, only they're not this blatant. 7 of the 9. How do you justify that? How do you justify going, you know what? We're going to get rid of 7 of the 9 of them. We're going to get rid of, almost 3/4 of them. We don't need them anyway. People are just going to use them and they're going to dirty things up. We don't need that. Now, fortunately, the ACLU is pushing back on this, as they should. But this is the kind of theft that goes on. This is the kind of stuff that, thanks to the Supreme Court's ruling in 2013, rolling back a huge portion of the Voting Rights Act, now states like Georgia can pull this crap. Because it's no longer, no one's really looking. And the Trump administration isn't going to do anything. Because they want to suppress the vote as well. So it makes me wonder. It makes me wonder, what exactly we're going to tolerate. Now, the thing that was interesting to me is the AP finished off the article by saying, in addition to statewide offices, Randolph County voters will also vote for state legislative seats in November. All 9 polling locations were used during this year's primary and the Republican runoff, so it's unclear whether those locations would be closed down during this general election. So, again, you had all these people who knew where to go during the primary and the runoff, not going to know where to go in November. And what's that going to do? That's going to disenfranchise people, because people are going to show up to the place where they went to vote, and it's going to be closed down. They're going to go, time to go home. Because who can then go, I'm going to drive all the way across town? Because that the people who are in charge of this are going to say, okay, what's the furthest distance away from this polling place that we can get these people to have to go to, where they just throw up their hands and go, screw it, I'm not going to go. That's what's coming. That's what these people do. That's the gig. So, I mean, it's one of those things that just really frustrated me to no end, because it is so blatant, and it's so in our face, and it's so wrong on every level. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, as we talked about on Friday, the state Supreme Court in Kentucky, they had a hearing on the state's right to work laws and asked a couple of questions about, what's the purpose, who benefits, and, why do they say that passing this kind of poison makes the state a business-friendly state? So we're going to get some thought on that. Also, your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
90% of the wealth. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1922. That was the day 1,300 workers from 4 railroad brotherhoods walked off the job in Joliet, Illinois, near Chicago. The walkout threatened to paralyze freight service for steel mills in nearby Gary and other regional industries. 400,000 railroad shopmen had been on strike across the country for nearly 7 weeks. Newspaper headlines that day warned a general strike of 2 million trademen loomed on the horizon. Brotherhood leaders promised sympathy strikes in response to threats made against their members by troops on duty at railroad centers and yards. There were also real concerns about the health and safety of trainmen, given rolling stock was no longer being maintained. In Joliet, workers stayed away under threats from troops. Additionally, Illinois Central trainmen faced threats from striking miners throughout Kentucky and Illinois, who warned, "Stop transporting non-union coal or suffer the consequences." Resentment had been building up against state guard troops stationed in Illinois yards. Earlier in the week, striking shopmen had engaged in a fatal confrontation with Joliet sheriffs that left a striker and a railroad detective dead and scores injured. Riot orders were called when authorities sought to arrest striking shopmen who had stormed the home of a scab. Brotherhood workers refused to return to work unless the troops were removed. Warren Stone, president of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers, stated, quote, "We are not going to have our men shot up or beaten up or threatened by armed guards at railroad shops and yards. When the men cannot go to work without having irresponsible armed guards endangering their lives, they may go home and stay there. There will be 100 more cases soon if conditions are not changed." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Lessons of the past we all learn with workers' blood. The mistakes of the bosses we must pay for. From the cities to the farmlands and churches full of mud. 'Cause war has always been the boss's way, sir. Come on! The unit forever defending rights. Let's
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So as we talked about on Friday last week, the state Supreme Court in Kentucky asked the question, why do you believe right-to-work laws are business-friendly? Why do businesses think that? And the woman on the court, I thought, said it perfectly. The whole reason that maybe it's viewed that way is, they don't have to worry about bargaining with a strong union for better wages, hours, and conditions. They can have dictatorial control. That's what they really want. And it's one of those things that, I don't know that any court has really brought up. So good on Kentucky for doing it, which is why I've asked James DeWeese to come talk with us. He is a union representative, a Teamster rep there in Kentucky, also a candidate for State House of Representatives there in Kentucky. James, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show this evening.
So am I getting this right? The state Supreme Court is actually taking up the question of right to work in your state and ask the question, who benefits?
Well, they had their opening arguments the other day. I'm not really close to this case, but, this is a very, very important case to us here in Kentucky. And, and some of the reasons, right to work has been passed for, since the 2016 legislation cycle. And we are already facing some very ill effects in our state. And, of course, with the right to work being a scam as it is, and we've been saying that for a very long time that it's a scam, where we're constantly told that it's going to raise wages and it's going to increase employment and things of that nature. We have now found ourselves the ranking third to the last state in the country in wage growth. So right to work's a very serious issue for us already.
Yeah, I mean, and it was amazing how quickly they rammed it through as soon as Bevin and the Republicans took over.
Yes, and they, the Republicans, they promised a lot of transparency, bringing transparency to our government and things like that. They completely locked us out of the Capitol. They locked us out of the committee rooms. They didn't let us have our voice, and they rammed this legislation through, knowing that most people did not want this bill to pass at all.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the statement by by one of the justices. Her name was Elizabeth Hughes, and she because the state's arguing that it makes passing this law makes it just more attractive to businesses and is going to make it politically attractive and policy-wise attractive to business. And she says we're in a world where we ought to acknowledge real facts. And the reason it's perceived as business friendly is because it has a direct impact on the strength of the union, which has a direct impact on the wages that are negotiated for workers. She says what the legal effect is a whole different question, but the reality of it is that they have more potential to control their labor costs if they are not sitting across the table from a strong union, not sitting across the table from you and your members. And that to me is the most accurate statement that I think you can say about right to work.
That's correct, and but it goes the effect of right to work goes another step further too, because where unions set the bar in the community, the non-union companies must compete, and so as wages are lowered without unions, other non-union companies, they reap higher profits too, while our paychecks continue to get slashed all through the community. And then there's other domino effects to it too. We start losing taxation, our local taxation, and our schools start suffering, our local communities start suffering, our services diminish, and so right to work has a tremendous domino effect all through the community.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just there. I mean, it's all kinds of things: unemployment insurance, workers' comp, worker safety. All of the negatives seem to go up in places that pursue this. Yet, what I hear from the people who are pushing this poison is that it's the utopia. There are going to be more jobs created. In fact, the attorney for your governor made the argument that, well, what'll happen is we'll get more jobs to come into the state because we'll steal them from other states. So we'll steal all these jobs from other states, and we'll be able to do, we'll be able to do more, and we'll get higher taxes, all that stuff. And by having more jobs, wages will magically go up, and it'll be great. And yet no state where that has happened there's nothing. There's nowhere to point to. You go, this is the model.
Yeah. Yeah. And here in Kentucky, I mean, we were starting to become a manufacturing leader anyway. A lot of companies were already moving here without the right to work law. When a company moves into a state, let's just be clear about this. When they move into a state, what do they want? They want a educated workforce. They want people with skills. They want roads. They want communities that have services that will transpire into permanent residency from the people who live there. And those are the things that companies look for when they move to a state, not a right to work law. This is just a give back from donors that these guys have taken, in my opinion, to increase profits for these companies.
So have you seen a massive increase in employment in your state? I mean, have you been able to steal jobs from Ohio? And
no, you know, they're bragging about a few that's moved here, but it's nothing out of the ordinary that I see. You know, unemployment is at a really low level right now. So, you know, you're not going to see any massive effect anyway.
Right.
You know, anybody who wants a job can typically get a job, but that's the problem. What kind of job are you able to get? And wages are so low, people are barely making it. You know, and what's sad is, you know, you used to see so many people that are out of a job, they're struggling, and now you see people with a job and they're still struggling. It's awful. People deserve a living wage. They deserve affordable health care. They deserve retirement. And the only vehicle for that is unionization.
Yeah, I would argue they don't deserve it. They've earned it. It's something
that
we should be demanding and that people earned and they should have. You know,
absolutely.
To me, it's that simple. But, you know, here's the other part of this question then. Because you're right. You know, unemployment across the country is at historic low levels, and we're not seeing wages going up at all. In fact, we're actually seeing them going backwards, which is kind of surprising economists, because, you know, we've been led to believe for so long that as more jobs are created, the labor markets tighten, that wages go up, but the numbers just don't bear that out.
That's right. I mean, people are truly struggling. I mean, wages are at an awful low for our communities, and we're going to have to figure out a way to get those back up.
Let's talk about you. Why are you running for state rep? Why would you put your name in the middle? Why would you throw yourself in the fishbowl?
Well, the very things we're talking about. You know, I want to make government work for working families, and I don't feel that it is. It's working for the select few.
And how are you going to change that?
Well, you know, there's a number of things. You know, I'm always going to support good wage growth, good livable minimum wages. I support affordable health care. I support our labor folks and their issues. We got to quit whittling away at laws that protect workers. You know, those are some of the things that we can do. And you know, one thing I'd like to do is I'd like to actually pass a law, and that if you work for a company and you get elected in office, they got to pay your benefits and hold your job while you're in service to the community. That is the true barrier that keeps working people from going into office.
No, you're absolutely right. And you know, it's interesting because, you know, I have a lot of people here in Pennsylvania who think that elected officials are paid too much.
Mm-hmm. Well, you hear some people that foregoes their wages, but it's important that elected officials are paid so that working people can go there and not suffer from a lack of income.
No, that's the argument I make here with that. Yeah. You know, everyone wants to say, well, they should forego their pensions and they should forego vacation and all this other stuff. I'm going, no. No, they work like everybody else. They deserve. That's right. They should get pensions and health care, and they should get vacations like everybody. Like I want everyone else to have. I would like to have what they have. And this is that weird moment because, you know, we've kind of turned into a country that goes, you know, Jim DeWeese has health care. He's got a pension. I don't have one. Screw him. He shouldn't have it. Instead of going, hey, he's got all this great stuff. How do we all get it? I mean, when did that change?
It has been changing over decades. And just like the verbiage that you hear against our teachers and our first responders, when I was a kid, we couldn't talk enough about how they weren't paid enough, and now we're talking about how they're paid too little or how they're paid too much.
Yeah, they're greedy.
You know, they need a good wage. We need good benefits for them, just like any other worker.
So let me ask you this, because, you know, obviously The Republicans passed right to work, within on a special session in your state, which I keep telling people here in Pennsylvania. If Scott Wagner is elected governor here in Pennsylvania, the people of Kentucky will get whiplash as to how fast it passes here in Pennsylvania. Is there a way forward? Do you see a path to repealing that, to eventually down the road going, you know what? It hasn't worked. I mean, I look at what happened in Missouri just last week, what happened in Ohio in 2011, where the people spoke. What do you see happening in Kentucky going forward?
Well, the thing is, once you lose something, it's really hard to get it back. Okay, and it's going to take a lot of organizing in a lot of different ways for us to get Kentucky back to just where we were pre-2016. And of course, at the level of Frankfurt, we're going to have to get a good union-friendly, worker-friendly governor in there. We're going to have to change the makeup of our Senate and the makeup of our House, which is a really big feat in getting all three of those together. But in the meantime, until we can do that, we need to be organizing on our shop floors. We need to be out talking to our neighbors and talking to our friends and rebuilding the movement person by person. And even with myself, I'm when Right to Work passed, I'm a business agent for at Teamsters Local 89, representing the UPS workers. When it passed, I took it upon myself to start treating my members as if they had right to work and going to the orientations, personally signing them up, talking to them about the importance of a union, stuff we should have been doing all along.
Right.
I've personally been doing that. I'm not seeing any problems with signing up members because these young folks, to me, are the future of labor. And I know the millennials get a bad rep, but I love them. They are some of the most vicious fighters the labor movement has seen in decades. No. And I'm really enjoying talking to them and helping build the movement up from the ground floor up.
No, that's a good thing. I mean, because I've had some people say, well, this could be the best thing that happens to labor, that they have to go back and they have to hand collect dues. They have to look their members in the eyes and hold on to the more militant ones, which may have the entire movement become much more militant as you oust the moderating voices. And maybe that's going to be true. But I look at the millennials and the polling numbers are overwhelmingly they support unions because look, they watch their parents get screwed over. They watch them lose jobs and worry about healthcare and worry about all that stuff. And not to mention that as a generation, they're saddled with the most student debt in the history of this country. So they're going to be ticked off to begin with.
Well, I appreciate that comment there because what some of the things you just said is one of the things I impress upon our young members is stability because they don't know what it is. They watch the mom and dad go from job to job to job, house to house, or apartment to apartment. And when you explain to them, hey, we have a union, we have stability because we stick together. This is what we've already achieved, and this is what we're looking to achieve further. They get it. They truly get it. They're energized with it, and that's why I'm very, very, very pro millennial for our movement.
Oh, I am too, because we don't have any other. We have no other choice. Don't let me bring you down, but they're our last hope. I mean, the children of the future. They're the future of this movement. They're the future of work in this country, and what they do now and what we're able to help move forward on is the future that they're going to inherit, and my children and your children are going to inherit.
That's right, and I work at Teamsters Local 89. We're a very strong local across the country. People know us. We will fight anyone that we need to fight for our members, and we're always willing to take on the fight. But when you speak to the young workers about this, they get really excited about being union members, and they get really excited about having choice and having the democracy of the union. And so I am very upbeat with our young members and what they're capable of doing. And our movement has had fluctuations in throughout our history, and we didn't always have laws that protected us. Okay. And yet we survived, and we'll continue to survive so long as people are pushed in the corner and they're not making enough and they're struggling. We will always survive.
Yeah, good point. Let's get back to your campaign for a minute,
Sure.
because obviously money is always an issue. Can people donate to your campaign?
Yes, they can. And matter of fact, I just walked out of a fundraiser I just had, and we've raised a little bit of money. We need a lot more. You're able to donate to me at www.jamesdeweese.com, and if anybody would like to make a contribution there, I would greatly appreciate it. And we need more working people in legislature. That's what we have to change. Those are the dynamics that we have to change. We need regular working folks that knows what a gallon of gas truly costs. They know what a gallon of milk truly costs, and they feel the pain when those prices rise.
Let me ask you a last line of questioning. I ask everybody who runs for office, what's that one thing that's your issue? That there's, look, I want people to compromise where they can, where you can work together to get things done. But what's the one issue that James DeWeese says, there's no compromise on? This is my value.
That would be people and people's paychecks. That's my one issue. That's my main issue.
Spoken like a true labor guy, James. Good stuff.
Yep.
I appreciate the thoughts, the time. Good luck to you. I wish you the best, and I'd love to have you come back and talk to us again once you're elected.
Hey, anytime you give me a call, and I'll be happy to talk about any issues that you'd like to talk about. We've got a lot of them going on in this country, and we got a lot of work to do.
Good stuff, James. I appreciate the time. Best of luck to you, man.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Good stuff. And again, check out the website, jamesdeweese.com. We'll make sure we get links out so you can throw him a buck or two. Make sure that they're competitive. I mean, and it's all these campaigns. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Ones to starve, we're the first ones to die. The first ones in line for that pie in the sky. And we're always the last when the craving shit out for the worker is working when the fat counts the ball. We're the first ones to starve, we're the first ones to die.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1989. That was the day that Jerry Horgan was killed while walking the picket line. Jerry was a chief steward for the Communication Workers of America Local 1103. The communication workers were on strike against telecom giant NYX Corporation, which became part of the present-day Verizon company. At issue was management's proposal to shift a greater share of the healthcare costs onto the backs of workers. The strike wore on for a total of 17 weeks. In total, nearly 60,000 telephone workers in the Northeast participated in the walkout. These included both CWA members as well as members of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Jerry Horgan was part of the strike in the town of Valhalla, New York, about 25 miles north of New York City. Jerry was struck by a vehicle driven by a strikebreaker while walking the picket line. The driver was the daughter of one of the company's managers. She was never charged for hitting Jerry, although some at the scene claimed she accelerated after hitting him with her car. One witness, Charles Pierce, recalled that Jerry was run down like a dog. The CWA honors Jerry's memory by wearing red t-shirts. In 2010, a CWA article titled "Why We Wear Red" explained, quote, "The idea started small. We asked our members to wear red on Thursday to remind the company of the blood they had spilled and to show support for our fallen brother. But it quickly spread nationwide as a sign of solidarity every Thursday at CWA locations. Jerry Horgan was killed standing up for the rights of workers and fighting for a better tomorrow for all workers." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
The most important issues of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So I didn't see any Amoroso tweets coming out of Trump today. I thought for sure there'd be something, another another dog comment, another, lazy, crying, whiny, second chance. Anybody buy the second chance argument, by the way? Evidently they were giving her a second chance. Anybody believe that Trump's capable of that? You think that's possible? I know that I don't. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world and in Washington, D.C. Justin Duckham, Talk Media News. Justin, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, great to be here as always.
So, anything on the Omarosa? I can never say her name right.
Omarosa, she was, interestingly absent from a lot of the coverage today. Last night she was on The Daily Show and she acknowledged the fact that, there are legal proceedings coming from the Trump campaign to pretty much enforce the non-disclosure agreement. And so therefore she now says that she has been advised to not discuss the tapes and not move forward with the explosive bombshell media appearances that she's been giving so far. So it looks like that may have been successful for right now. It's certainly taken a lot of the oxygen out of the room, but the book is out, and considering the penchant that she's had for drama so far, it doesn't necessarily seem like there's much of a possibility that she's going to be quiet for too much longer. She's done a lot of damage. The White House is trying to move away from that now, but the cat's out of the bag. You already had the president calling her a dog and making this into a much bigger story than it should have been.
Yeah, I mean, had he just shut his mouth and let it go and, think she's just, she was on that, what was that reality show not too long ago that nobody watched?
Celebrity Big Brother.
Yeah, that was it. And, had you just left her alone and go, oh, she's just a kook and let her go, nobody would have, I don't think anyone would have paid her much attention. But as soon as you start going out the dog and the, we gave her a second chance and, all of the low life or whatever else he called her. Now people are going, wait a second, that's not presidential.
No, I mean, even after that appearance, we had the White House really changing their tune on her. That was back in February, I believe. Initially the White House said that Omarosa resigned, but was going to stay on in the administration until January 20th of this year. The day after that happened, Sarah Sanders from the podium said that Omarosa was actually coming in later that day, the day after she was, as we now know, fired by John Kelly, and really kind of trying to play nice with it. Trump said that she was a great person the day after she was fired. And then everything changed after that Celebrity Big Brother appearance. They changed their tune. They did some kind of wise crack about how this was the fourth time that Omarosa was fired, saying that she was fired multiple times from The Apprentice and then fired from the administration, and really sort of giving her the exact message that she needed for her tell-all book, shaping that narrative. And lo and behold, when the book that everybody in D.C. expected to come finally came, it pretty much is a response to that one comment from the Deputy White House Press Secretary from the podium. So they certainly made their bed when they poked the bear.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I look at this and there's this conspiratorial part of me that goes, this is exactly what they want. They want this massive distraction so that we're not realizing how badly we're getting ripped off. We're not realizing how they're in a regulatory fashion changing most of the actions of government. We're not talking about the children that have been ripped away from their parents and probably will never get back with them. We're not talking about Turkey. We're not talking about Iraq or Afghanistan. We're not talking about any of the other stuff. We're not even talking about Russia anymore. We're talking about the pie fight.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that people put out a lot. My general response to that is I think it's more of a byproduct of all of this. And frankly, I think it gives them too much credit, since there really is just this recognition that they can't necessarily organize a two-car parade. And if they were really that dedicated to fulfilling that agenda, they would be doing it in a way where you wouldn't have Scott Pruitt and others, lasting in positions for months and months and months after it became just a political landmine. But lo and behold, that's how we've seen this administration conduct itself.
That is an excellent point. And one that has been made to me numerous times. And one that, when I used to say things about the Bush administration, I have a friend who believes 9/11 was an inside job, and I make the argument that I don't even think, George could put together a picnic basket to take out on the road. So let alone plan something like that. And you look at this administration, much more chaotic than the Bush administration, which is just kind of amazing to say that as well. But yeah, there you go. Let's move on. Today, evidently, Trump and the White House revoked the security clearance of John Brennan. Is that right?
Exactly, yeah. This was an announcement from the president that Sarah Sanders read from the podium. saying that this was due to erratic behavior from John Brennan, saying that, you know, he's had unhinged appearances on the internet and on TV, and therefore can no longer be trusted to have access to classified information, saying that this is basically a courtesy given to former officials so that if they need to consult with the current intelligence community, they would have the ability to do so. And the argument now is that the risk of, you know, Brennan continuing to do this outweighs any benefits that he could provide. And of course, this argument just doesn't stand up under scrutiny. This is pretty clearly politically motivated, more so when you consider the fact that the president in the statement said that he is going to be reviewing the security clearance guidelines for James Comey, for James Clapper, for Susan Rice, for Peter Strzok, for Lisa Page, for Bruce Orr, just this long list of officials of people who really the only thing they have in common is that they have publicly criticized the president. And then really just adding another veneer of ridiculousness to this. Sarah Sanders couldn't even articulate what exactly the criteria for this would be, just saying that this was going to be examined on a case-by-case basis moving forward, which pretty much just gave away the game and gave up the shop. So, you know, this is rightfully being seen as an act of political retaliation. Nobody's buying the administration's argument that this is anything beyond that. The ACLU has stepped in, noting that they are no fans of John Brennan and have been critics of him when it comes to, you know, torture, when it comes to drones, and just a whole myriad of other issues, but saying that this is a pretty blatant example of the government punishing a private citizen for free speech and setting up what could be a pretty big legal battle. This looks like, you know, this could have put him in some pretty precarious constitutional territory. The president has the right to do this, but as we've seen time and time again, when the president pretty much clearly states his motives, that gets him in trouble. That's what happened with the travel ban originally, and the fact that, and you know, I guess that also is what happened to Comey to a large extent when he said that, you know, the reason why he did it was to remove pressure on the Russia investigation. So I would not be surprised to see the fact that they made this about his tweets and his TV appearances come back to bite them.
As it should. I mean, at the end of it, I've often questioned, you know, why they continue to get them for a lifetime. You know, why does Henry Kissinger get them? I mean, you know, he's been out of any power for a long time. You know, why does this stuff continue? And it's always been thrown back at me that, you know, this is a small community, and they kind of, you know, they're kind of fluid and they bounce things off each other, and institutional knowledge, all of that stuff. And, you know, on a certain level, it makes a little sense. But to now say we're going to do this based purely on our political ideology and who we don't like, and if someone said something mean about us, I start to question it.
I mean, it's not it's not good. It's not how the government should be running, and there shouldn't be a precedent for, you know, outright punishing people through government means because they have political differences. You know, that's something that the right was in an uproar over when it came to the IRS scandal, when it looked like the Obama administration could be, you know, through the IRS punishing people.
Well, people still believe that. I just talked to a guy the other day who still believes that the IRS is punishing conservative groups even today, and pointing out that, you know, Trump is the head of is in the White House, and that the Republicans can control both branches of government, both you know, houses in Congress, and, you know, the Supreme Court. He still believes the IRS is attacking conservative voices, and the media is out to get them. And now, granted, this guy seems now to be off the path, but still, you know, there are still people who believe that they're still doing it.
Well, you know, according to the White House, the president is consistently under audit, even for tax returns that he, you know, hasn't filed yet. When a reporter asked preemptively before he filed his taxes last time around whether or not the president would be releasing it publicly, the response from the podium was, "Nope, it's under audit," even though it hadn't had the chance to be subjected to that yet. So this is the mindset we have. You know,
man, every day do you wake up and go, how bad, how much worse can it get? You know, how much crazier can people be? I mean, because, you know, lately I've had some conversations with people who are buying this QAnon stuff, and, you know, I've been of this mindset, you know, that we've been down the rabbit hole, but this just seems to be terminal velocity free fall into insanity.
I mean, it's a dangerous precedent. I think the media was largely irresponsible for giving it attention in the first place, based on the fact that, you know, there were a couple of signs at a rally I've been to a lot of rallies. I've seen a lot of signs that were pretty much off message, and I didn't necessarily dive into that or think that was worth, a long, deep look by the press. There have been like Lyndon LaRouche signs at every single protest you can think of for decades and decades. No one's really.
And he's a crank, and we ignore that. We move on.
Right. Yeah. No, I think it's dangerous. I think what really would be damaging for this is if the president ever starts to embrace it. This is obviously being enjoyed by a large portion of his base, and it's not that far of a jump to imagine the president, starting to appeal to that, starting to, maybe speak in dog whistles to members of that community, much like he's, pretty much done similarly coded language to portions of his base who are pretty clearly racist.
Wow. I guess this is how they reach out to the non-evangelicals. This is their dog whistle. I know when Pence talks to his clan, that's the crowd. I guess this is the non-evangelical crowd. Crazy.
I mean, the evangelical crowd believes that Trump was chosen by God and that election night was a miracle. And the Q nonsense gives another easy out. This idea that the president is right no matter what and is secretly in cahoots with Mueller. And so therefore every error so far has just been part of his grand master plan. It's terrifying.
Oh my God. Oh, somebody wake me when it's over. Let's move on. Evidently, Sarah Sanders gave some false employment data from from her spot. Am I surprised? Yeah. She lies about everything else. Why would I not be surprised about lying about employment data?
Well, what's interesting here is that she apologized for it.
Oh,
she said yesterday that the president, during his 16 months or so in office, created more jobs for African Americans than President Barack Obama did during his entire 8 months. That turned out, or during his entire
8 years.
Sorry, 2-term tenure. There we go. That was pretty swiftly fact-checked and determined to not be true by a lot of people. Obama created 3 million jobs for African Americans during his presidency. Trump so far has created about 700,000. And then we had the Council of Economic Advisors coming out and saying that there was a miscommunication with the press secretary and then giving their own spin on the data, one that included periods of time that hurt Trump, that included the end of the Bush presidency for about 3 months, and then data that helped boost Trump by including the final 3 months of the Obama presidency. So just a lot of, head spinning over that. But overall, at the end of it, Sanders did apologize, but then did a bit of a sorry, not sorry thing by saying, I'm sorry for miscommunicating this, but I'm not sorry for the 700,000 jobs that were created under Trump. Something that nobody was really attacking anybody over. So.
But here's the thing. Is she finding a conscience? Because, she was asked the other day if Trump had used the N-word, and she said that she can't guarantee it. I can't guarantee it.
I mean, I honestly just don't know how she has a job in this White House after that. Considering the fact that the White House goes through great lengths to just pretty much fudge the facts on a lot of things, that just was staggering in its own right. And, frankly, I'm somebody who was a skeptic about that tape existing. I think the Omarosa claims for that weren't necessarily very convincing. Since there seems to be a lot of contradictory information for that.
Right.
I'm of the mindset that if that tape existed, it would have been out a long time ago. But after that statement and performance from the podium,
kind of got to wonder.
I think it seems a lot more likely now than it did.
But here's the thing: does it hurt him? Yeah. I mean, honestly and truthfully, does a tape of him, going on, basically saying the N-word for 20 minutes, does it hurt him at all, or does it actually strengthen his base by going, yeah, damn right, we should be able to say that?
I've had a lot of arguments over this. My main idea for it is that I think it would hurt him immeasurably, solely because we have a pretty simplistic view of race when it comes to sort of the broader discourse for it. People all over the country will say, well, I'm not racist because I don't use that word, or I'm not racist because I don't wear a hood. And then once you take away that veneer, when you really just kind of boil it down to it and give the actual example for it, no more of this, beating around the bush, no more dog whistles, no more Confederate flags, or, going after NFL players. When you actually get down to the root of it, I think there's going to be no other explanation except for, that the president is racist. And I think that's a very easy to understand argument for a lot of Trump supporters who don't necessarily read the most woke literature or spend time on Twitter reading, the opinions of writers of color and whatnot. I think there's no real way to avoid that conclusion based on how we talk about race in the U.S. And I don't think there's going to be much wiggle room for anybody to come to his defense. There could be an argument that it just happened about 10 years ago, but this would be like the Hollywood Access Hollywood tape on steroids. I think there's a much different standard in this country, right or wrong, when it comes to racism versus sexism, and I think it would absolutely hobble him. So that's my far-reaching, perhaps overly optimistic take on it, I guess.
I hope you're right. My fear is it doesn't. My fear is that the base, embraces it. See, he really is one of us, and moves it right forward. And finally, evidently, the CDC has reported that there were 72,000 opioid deaths in 2017.
Yeah, new data from the CDC, very, very disheartening. 72,000 opioid deaths in the U.S. A lot of these, about 30,000 of which ended up being from fentanyl and other, basically prescription drugs that get abused.
Yep.
And it really highlights the fact that this happened under the president's watch, and it shows that the strategy either isn't in place or didn't really snap into place.
There's a strategy?
Beginning. And that's the issue too. There's been a couple of meetings. There's been some gestures to try to move forward with some, small things, but overall, we still don't have a drug czar in place. And that should really terrify a lot of people. There's an acting director right now who was nominated. His, nomination took about 3 months to finally go up to the Senate. There still hasn't been any hearings for that. And, as the data reflects today, this is something that is a crisis and warrants a government-wide response. And there just doesn't necessarily seem to be anybody who is, in the Senate-approved position to make sure that happens.
Yeah, I mean, do we even know who the people are? I mean, do we know the situation? Do we have any clue of who the target is? I mean, like most of the people I know who have been addicted to painkillers are people who got hurt at work. It started off, or like anything. I had my gallbladder out a couple years ago, and the first thing that is, here's some Vicodin. If the pain gets to be too much, I'm like, no, I'm all right. I'll deal with it, one way or another. But every time I messed up my knee, here's some Percocet. It's always here's some painkillers, and it's the same thing when you get to especially with people who get really injured with really major injuries that are you can't sleep at night, you got a back injury, you can't even breathe, and that we just dope them up so that they feel nothing. Is it that? Is it who? I don't even know. Do we have an idea of who these folks are?
I mean, we have an idea. It's I guess to a large extent it dovetails with Trump's base, which is why this is getting sympathetic coverage when, other addiction epidemics like crack or whatnot kind of fell through the cracks.
Right.
So that's a larger systemic issue that I'm not going to touch into.
Okay. No, I was just curious if you know.
Well, I mean, it's a complicated issue, and it boils down to the fact that there's nobody in charge who has that expertise to really navigate this. The person that they put in charge of the Office of National Drug Control Policy, the drug czar, who has not been confirmed yet, has no public health experience, has a bit of a tenure at the Justice Department, I believe Ford Motors as well, and then served in the Bush White House in a non-public health capacity as the person who pretty much looked at security clearances and whatnot. And then he, after pretty much being kicked out of the White House, according to the rumor mill, was elevated to this massively important issue, and then just hasn't really been able to do anything with it, nor been much of a public face to announce it. And lo and behold, here we are today after months and months and months of the Trump presidency, and there's just no clear-cut examples for what exactly has changed and who's been aided by this, and that's just depressing.
It is depressing. But I thought you were going to tell me that the guy worked for the company that makes fentanyl or something like that. That's how screwed up things are. Just is what it is. Justin, I appreciate the time. Sad stuff to hear about, but I appreciate it. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you, Rick. Have a good one.
Good stuff. Our good friend Justin Duckham, Talk Media News. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Time to talk.
Radio I for the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. Chances are you may never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, inspecting an elevator, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
So Christian tweeted back at us on the opening about the voter ID. He tweets back, true story. I misplaced my PA license in 2014. PennDOT wanted me to pay $50, not less. I just needed a duplicate card. No new photo needed to be taken or anything. He said I had to pay a Lancaster cab to pick me up and drive me to Westland DLC, the driver's license center of the DMV. Cost me over $200 in all. $200 is a fortune to me. And, this is part of that as well. Just to get some places, especially if you're a little, we often focus on urban areas, but what about the rural poor? What about people who live in rural areas where there's no public transportation at all? And you end up in a scenario where you're going to have to pay somebody to drive you. Again, we understand why they're doing it, but there's just another story. And when this was going on in 2012, I heard hundreds of these stories of people who the struggles were just, insurmountable. And, and then they get my vote doesn't matter. It's just one vote. I'm just going to pass this time. And then you magnify that by thousands of people who are disenfranchised, and you do exactly what the right wing wants. Keep down the number of people who are going to vote because their side wins when that happens. It's just that sad. And Christian, thanks so much for the response and the story. Good to hear. If you missed any of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Hour 2 after this.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
America's political history has been written in the fierce narrative of war. Not our country's many military clashes with foreign nations, but our own unending war for democracy in the USA. Generation after generation of moneyed elites have persisted in trying to take wealth and power from the workaday majority and concentrate both in their own hands to establish a de facto American aristocracy. Every time, the people have rebelled in organized mass struggles against the monopolists and financial royalists, literally battling for a little more economic fairness, social justice, and equal opportunity. And now the time of rebellion is upon us again, for we the people are suddenly in the grip of a brutish level of monopolistic power. Corporate concentration of markets, profits, workplace decision-making, political influence, and our nation's total wealth is surpassing that of the infamous era of robber barons. Apple, which just recently became the first U.S. corporation to reach a stock value of $1 trillion, is now larger than Bank of America, Boeing, Disney, Ford, Volkswagen, and 20 other brand-name giants combined. And the powerful tech industry is now controlled by just 5 superpowers, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Google, and Netflix, which raked in half of this year's stock price gains by the 500 largest corporations. Indeed, the recent gold rush of corporate mergers has created mega firms, shriveling competition in most industries: airlines, banks, drug companies, food, hospitals, hotels, law firms, media, oil, etc. Fewer and bigger corporations mean that those few attain overwhelming power over the rest of us. They're able to control workers' pay, jack up prices, dominate elections, and become even fewer, bigger, and more powerful. This is Jim Hightower saying it's an all-out corporate class war on the American people, and they're winning.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
The man who sends the investor class diving for their tax shelters. Rick Smith.
At every trough you stop to feed. With your arrogance, your ignorance and greed. Now here come the cuts and redundancy. Through the absolute indifference, the avarice, incompetence, your arrogance, your ignorance, your greed.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So back on August 8th, the American Legislative Exchange Council, or ALEC, held their 45th annual little soiree into, hey, how are they going to divvy up the country? How are they going to pass and push legislation that's going to benefit them? How are they going to use, the money of the billionaires to get them more? And it's one of these moments where you go, we've become aware of ALEC because of a number of groups. One of those groups, the Center for Media and Democracy, who has done a fantastic job with their ALEC exposed pieces. And here to talk a little bit about the latest, the 45th legislative thing there by ALEC. I've asked Mary Bottari to come talk with us. She's a reporter with the Center for Media and Democracy. Mary, thanks for taking time for us.
No problem.
So what did we find out? What's on the table? What are we going to lose in the next legislative session if ALEC gets their way? How bad is it going to be?
Well, it's bad, as usual. ALEC had its 45th annual meeting of legislators and corporate lobbyists at the Swank Hilton in New Orleans last week, and they came up with a number of ALEC bills, new ALEC bills that will spread out through the country, and folks, facing these bills in states won't know the names of the corporate lobbyists and the corporations pushing these bills. So it comes as no surprise that they have new anti-union measures along with right to work and paycheck protection. They're introducing a new measure that sort of relies on a bill by a guy named Richard Berman, and Berman.
Dr. Evil.
Dr. Evil has popped up front group after front group attacking wages, attacking the minimum wage, attacking unions, and he's long pushed a measure at the federal level to force unions to recertify every few years with a vote of a majority of the members in the unit. So not just the majority of those voting, but a majority of those in the unit.
Right. So that every person who doesn't vote, it's a no vote.
That's right. And so they're pushing this version of the bill, which will reach into states and cause, further damage in the states. It's a very strange bill. I mean, imagine a bill forcing sort of the unseating of corporate directors if the majority of all shareholders, not just those casting ballots, didn't vote, or uncertifying a corporation if you can't mobilize all those shareholders to vote. So that's what they're putting on the table at ALEC, and that's one of the many damaging bills.
No, they don't run out of bad ideas, do they?
No, they don't. So another bad idea is that they'll be considering, they considered for the first time something called the Uniform Worker Classification Act. And this is a type of bill that promotes short-term contracts and freelance work over permanent jobs. And the resolution forces sort of a uniform standard for defining who is an employee and who is an independent contractor. And it gives a very, very broad definition of an independent contractor. And of course, what that means for a lot of employees is they are missing a lot of protections under wage and hour laws. They're missing protections for overtime work. They're missing protections for workman's comp if they're injured on the job. They're missing civil rights protections because they're not formally an employee of the company. So, while companies like Uber and Lyft and TaskRabbit are definitely changing the American job market, they're really generating low-paying jobs with few or no benefits. And ALEC, by passing this bill, is sort of promoting that type of economy and tearing down the sort of traditional economy that has provided protections for workers across the board.
Right. And this is kind of just a preemption of because I know people on the left who are saying, we need to strengthen employment laws. We need to figure out how to stop with all this gig employment and this independent contractor misclassification. So this is kind of, quickly hurrying up in a way, putting into law all of the horrible stuff before anyone can try and strengthen how bad our labor laws are today.
No, that's right. And they're reacting to cities and states. Like, for instance, New York State has taken steps to regulate the driver industry after 6 professional drivers killed themselves. And drivers for hire and taxi drivers say they're not making enough money to pay their bills to support their family. So the New York Unemployment Board ruled recently that Uber and Lyft drivers are formal employees of the company. And then you probably know that Seattle gave Uber and Lyft drivers the right to organize a union. So ALEC is moving forward trying to preempt the cities from doing those sort of smart, high road type strategies by passing this sort of low road type bill.
And where do we expect these bills to pop up? I mean, are we expecting them in a majority of the states? Where's the first place we expect this to pop up? Because I want to make sure that whoever puts it forth, we can target and we can know who it is and make sure that they took their name off the bill. Because we've seen in the past some people put ALEC legislation in and still leave the ALEC name on it. But
that's right.
Where are we expecting the first ones of these to fall?
Well, they're going to be in these red states like Wisconsin, where you have a trifecta of Republicans, like Governor Walker and is the head of the executive branch, and then we have an ALEC Republican as the head of the Senate, and an ALEC Republican as the head of the Assembly. So we'll see them popping up in states like that. Then there's a trade association that's peddling these bills at ALEC, and it's called the Net Choice Trade Association. And if you're an activist in your state, you need to keep an eye on the trade association pushing those kinds of bills.
And what was the name of that again?
Net Choice.
Oh, because you got to throw a choice in there, right?
Right. These companies with brand names, they're susceptible to boycotts and pressure and complaints, hide behind their trade association. So no one's ever heard of this thing called Net Choice, but that's the lobbyist that you probably keep an eye on in your state.
Yeah, I'm sure it's coming because even the people who would associate with ALEC, they're kind of pulling back because we don't want to be associated with, or at least here in Pennsylvania, because I've asked a number of Republican legislators over the years, do you go to these things? Are you associated? Do you get anything from them? And I always get the no, we don't do that here. And they do.
That's right.
They do.
They do. And so then you'll also be thrilled to know that ALEC invited Mark Janus, the plaintiff in the Janus versus AFSCME case,
he's their new
decided
toy
by the U.S. Supreme Court,
yeah,
to be a keynote speaker.
Well, he's their new toy.
He's their new toy, and he's, of course, stopped being an employee for the state of Illinois, and he's become a sort of puppet of this right-wing machine, which includes ALEC and State Policy Network. He's gone to work for a state policy network institution called the Illinois Policy Institute. And so for a while, he'll be a puppet of that machine. I doubt that they will permanently employ him for the rest of his career. So he should enjoy his time in Coke World.
Yeah, I'm hoping it's short lived. I'll tell you, I'm hoping that that they kick him to the curb real soon.
It could be. He's not the most riveting speaker, but he came to the ALEC meeting, and it was sort of a victory lap for this whole structure of institutions that have been funded by the Koch brothers, that have been funded by the Bradley Foundation, that have been funded by the Stern Foundation for years, to basically attack unions for purely partisan political purposes. And so they had that little victory lap down at ALEC in New Orleans this year.
Yeah, I mean that's just expected. I mean they won. They had their victory, and you knew they were going to continue. Outside of the labor and employment world, what else are we expecting? We're going to make gerrymandering great. Yes.
Oh, that's right. How could I forget? So they had a funny bill down there to declare that it is the job of the legislature to set legislative districts. And this is, of course, a direct reaction to your lawsuit out in Pennsylvania that challenged partisan gerrymandering and resulted in the courts doing a fairer redraw of the map to more fairly represent the voters of the state of Pennsylvania. And so anyways, we dubbed that the right to gerrymander resolution. And they're facing pressure really in the courts across the country, not just the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which did the right thing in that instance, but we had a federal court here in Wisconsin rule that our state was so hyper-partisan gerrymandering that it was unconstitutional on numerous grounds. And other federal courts have come to this kind of decision. I mean, this was not like some lefty-hippie, Wisconsin court. This is a court with two Republicans on the three-judge panel, or two judges who had been appointed by Republicans, and they decided that this gerrymandering and rigging the system was so egregious, slanted way. And so a lot of these lawsuits are still live. They're still, the lawyers are still working to try and get fairer maps. And it was pretty amusing that ALEC decided to stand up for the right to gerrymander.
But not surprising. No, I mean, look, I mean, this is them getting what they want. It's the power, it's the control. But as I understand, there's not all. It's not all paradise. It's not all roses and sunshine. There's actually some dissent going on. Or am I getting that wrong?
No, there was quite a bit of infighting at ALEC, especially in the Energy Task Force, where you have many different types of energy providers. So the old fossil fuel, coal, and petroleum guys, with newer gas guys, and with even newer renewable energy guys. They were battling out the policies that they would support in this meeting, because ALEC has really taken a far right position. I mean, they're against renewable energy. Like, who's against renewable energy? It's creating so many clean jobs. It's creating so many green jobs. You can have fossil fuels and all these other fuels and renewable energy at the same time. It just it seems sort of crazy to be against the good stuff. So there's been some infighting there, and it prompted long-term member ExxonMobil to quit ALEC recently. And ExxonMobil's been funded ALEC to the tunes of millions of dollars. It's been on board for years and years and years, and it just thought that some of the policies that ALEC was promoting earlier were even too crazy for them.
Wow.
So that continues to be, there continues to be a lot of sturm and drang around those policy matters at ALEC.
So it's not all rainbows and cloudy skies or smoggy skies.
It's not. Chris Taylor, who is a Wisconsin representative here in Madison, she goes to ALEC meetings every year just to keep an eye on them. And she said it was one of the most contentious, showing the most disarray in ALEC that she's ever seen. And she wrote an article about this at our website, exposedbycmd.org. But what particularly struck her, and the thing that got her a little exercise, was that a guy named David Horowitz, who's not known in right-wing circles. He has a think tank called the Freedom Center out in California. He's best known as a mentor to Trump's Stephen Miller, who's the architect of his anti-immigration policies. David Horowitz was out there saying all sorts of horrible things, extremely racist and sexist things.
Well, that's what he does.
That's what he does. But it was for Chris Biddle, who's been going to these meetings for a long time, it was really a rather sort of shocking turn. His job was to be there to promote a constitutional convention to rewrite the Constitution in, a way that the Koch brothers would like. And they've had many, many, many panels on this topic, and all of a sudden, up pops this guy who the Southern Poverty Law Center has called, a hate crime years and years and years because of his anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim views. And he was spouting these things from the stage, and she stood up to confront him. So there's her article about this is also at Exposed by CMD. And it's a new sort of not very good turn for Alex to now, in addition to all its controversial policies, to be actively embracing these issues. They say that they're only about public policy. They say that they don't want to get into the social issues. So, for instance, there's no ALEC abortion bills. There's no gay marriage bills, those kinds of things. But to give this guy such a prominent role at this meeting was a change for ALEC and something that people should take note of.
Yeah, it's scary. But, here's the other scary part. They're only 3 governors away from being able to hold a constitutional convention and ram through whatever it is they want.
Right. And so now imagine this guy rewriting the convention. Yeah. I mean, the Constitution. So you have your anti-Muslim plank and your anti-immigrant plank and your anti-Jew plank. It would just be ridiculous.
That's crazy. And look, I'm hoping your state of Wisconsin finds its way to sanity and ousts Scott Walker, because you guys just had your primary yesterday, and I was kind of sad Malin Mitchell didn't win. I would have liked to seen him run as governor, but you got a guy I think is pretty good too.
We had a lot of great candidates. I was just here at an event tonight where I talked to 10 people who are voting for 5 different candidates and really rigorous discussion. So we were lucky to have many different candidates. But in that kind of crowded field, a candidate who's run many times makes its way out. And so Wisconsin nominated Tony Evers, who's long been our school superintendent, who's battled Walker over school vouchers, and he's battled Walker over slash funding, and he's battled Walker over teacher certification, and he's a big supporter of working people in the education system. He's run a giant education system in Wisconsin with 1,000 employees and many hundreds of thousands of children. And he's really committed to the education issues. He knows how to talk to rural voters. He's run twice statewide. He's won with massive majorities. I think 70% in his last race. And so he will be the person that takes on Scott Walker in the fall. Scott Walker's poll numbers show him as being very vulnerable, and there's a lot of Walker fatigue, not just, of course, on the Democratic side, but also on the Republican side. So we're hoping that a common sense sort of person like Tony Evers, who's not a hysteric, he's very calm, he's very steady, and very informed, will motivate voters. At least that's what the Democrats are hoping.
No, that's what I think. I'm hoping it, because it would be nice to see, Wisconsin be the place where sanity begins to revive itself, and maybe that can spread across the country, as a lot of these bad ideas have. And finally, the last one I wanted to get to. Evidently, there's going to be another resolution coming out of the ALEC meeting on the Parkland shootings and on the school shootings. What were your thoughts of it?
Oh, that was really funny. They have a 2,000 or so word policy about school safety. They mentioned the word guns once. And, whatever your feelings are about the Second Amendment, whether you hunt or you don't hunt or whatever, I mean, clearly these high-powered semi-automatic rifles are a problem that need to be part of a school policy program, a school safety program. But the other interesting news out of Wisconsin that came last night is that State Senator Leah Buchmeier came from behind to knock off Kevin Nicholson in the GOP U.S. Senate primary against Tammy Baldwin. And Leah Buchmeier, you might remember, was the treasurer of ALEC and then the vice president of ALEC, and then she was the national chairwoman of ALEC in 2016. She was even given an award as ALEC's Iron Lady in 2017, and she will be taking on Tammy Baldwin. So this is a legislator here in Wisconsin who's introduced model bill after model bill after model bill from ALEC to, believe it or not, crush wages, bust unions, rip away health care from people, and do a whole bunch of other things. So the battle lines couldn't be clearer between Leah Buchmeier and Tammy Baldwin. This really is one of the Koch brothers' favorite people in the United States. And she will be out there trying to knock off Baldwin. My organization, Center for Media Democracy, sued her in 2013 because she was clearly at an ALEC meeting. She was tweeting about it and talking about it. She had clearly introduced a bill at the ALEC meeting to take away health care from people. And we wanted to know more about it. So we did an open records request under our state's open records law. And she told us she didn't have anything responsive to the request, as if she hadn't been at the ALEC meeting, as if she hadn't introduced the bill, as if she had any conversations with anyone in ALEC. So we sued her, and we won a big lawsuit against her. The judge was so angry at her for not even looking for her emails to be responsive to our request that she applied unprecedented punitive damages to her. And amusingly enough, all these years later, this lawsuit has come up in attack ads by friends of her opponents attacking her for being against Wisconsin open records. So it's ridiculous when money groups are all of a sudden for open records in order to make, score political points. But at the same time, it was funny for us to see our lawsuit featured in this race. And there's no doubt will come up again as they move forward into the fall, the contrast between Leah Buchmeier and U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin. Interesting stuff.
And I'm sure as it goes down the road, we'll have you back and we can bang it around some more. But Mary, I appreciate the time and the thoughts. Keep up the great work there.
Thank you for having me. We'll talk soon.
Good stuff. Mary Bottari. Again, check out their website, exposedbycmd.org. We'll get links out to make sure people can take a look at the fantastic work they do. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
The Trump administration has had the knives out for the Endangered Species Act for more than a year.
Administration using California wildfires to undermine endangered species.
The density of our forest is too high, the fuel load's too great.
And push for more aggressive logging. Amid record heat, Glacier National Park is now on fire. Plus, federal court orders Trump's EPA to ban a dangerous pesticide.
All of those dangers and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
People forget that trees are the things that are burning. That's why we have to clear cut them. Remember Smokey the Bear's motto, only you can prevent forests.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, before you get going, a little bit of business to get out of the way. I wanted to welcome aboard our newest GNR affiliate partner, KLDK, 96.5 FM in Dixon, New Mexico.
Hey, KLDK, welcome aboard.
That's up near Taos, one of my favorite parts of the country. What do you got for us today, Desi Doyen?
Well, first, another heat record shattered, this time in Glacier National Park in Montana over the weekend. The park recorded an all-time high of 100 degrees at Glacier National Park. And now a fast-moving wildfire has forced partial evacuation of the park. By the way, you may want to go see Glacier National Park's glaciers sooner rather than later, because thanks to global warming, most of its original 150 glaciers have disappeared. It's now down to just 26. 26, and it is expected to lose all of its glaciers within a few decades. Meanwhile, not surprising for Californians, but NOAA announced that July 2018 in California was officially the hottest month ever recorded in the state. That sustained record heat has made firefighting extremely difficult for those ongoing 16 major fires burning in the state. Smoke from those fires extends as far as New York City. California fire officials and forestry experts, firefighters, and scientists all say that longer and hotter summers driven by climate change are a primary factor in worsening western wildfires. But the Trump administration is denying the role of climate change and instead is using the fires as pretext for a full court press to push major policy changes that benefit politically powerful agriculture and logging industries.
Hate to let any good catastrophe go to waste.
Yep, although the California firefighting agency CAL FIRE has repeatedly insisted there is no shortage of water for firefighting, Trump Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross last week directed federal fishery managers to waive endangered species rules for rivers. That, as LA Times columnist Michael Hiltzik explained in a recent broadcast, is actually a transparent cover to undermine the Endangered Species Act and justify diverting more water to corporate agribusiness operations in the Central Valley.
So the real subtext here is, once again, an effort to serve the growers. And the whole point of having an Endangered Species Act is to make sure that they survive despite all of these economic interests that are lined up to kill them off.
And then, in a visit to California neighborhoods that were devastated by wildfire on Sunday, Trump Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke entirely dismissed climate change as a factor.
It doesn't matter whether you believe or don't believe in climate change.
Actually, yes, it does matter whether you believe or don't believe in climate change.
It doesn't matter whether you believe or don't believe in climate change. What is important is we manage our forests.
Now that is a euphemism for commercial logging, which Zinke made clear when he went even further in an interview with right-wing outlet Breitbart News. In a dangerous escalation of rhetoric, Zinke falsely blamed environmental groups for the wildfires.
We have been held hostage by these environmental terrorist groups that have not allowed public access, that refuse to allow harvest of timber.
Environmental terrorists? Really?
That's what he said. Now, actual forestry scientists say the exact opposite, that forest management is actually far more complex, climate change can't be ignored, and what's actually needed is more funding for comprehensive techniques like controlled burns, not more logging. And that requires more funding from the federal government.
So if we just listen to everything that the Trump administration says and understand it to mean the opposite, then we'd be in pretty good shape.
Then we'd be in line with what scientists say. Finally, some good news. A federal appeals court has ordered the Trump EPA to ban all uses of the controversial pesticide chlorpyrifos within 60 days. The court ruled that former Trump EPA chief Scott Pruitt endangered public health by refusing to ban the dangerous pesticide despite extensive scientific evidence that even tiny levels of exposure can harm the developing brains of children and babies.
Evidence schmevidence. For much more evidence on all of these stories, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Please, baby, please, what fools are we who cannot see the forest for the trees?
Remember Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
He's going the distance. He's going for speed. She's all
So we've all heard of the study that was done a couple of years ago that says in the next 20 years, half of all the jobs that we do currently will be done by computers or robots or AI or whatever. Half of the jobs we're currently doing today will be gone, and we'll all be standing on the street corner looking at each other. Seems to be what we're being told. So don't ask for an increase in that minimum wage, and don't ask for wage increases or benefits or any of that stuff. Just be happy you have a job now. Which, I got to tell you, I love that frame because, it keeps people from not demanding a portion of the wealth that they create, and also keeps them grateful for having the job and having not been thrown to the curb already. But how bad is it going to be? How bad will be the future of AI? Will everyone be standing out on the street corner looking at each other? I don't know. That's why I've asked my good friend, Dr. Stephen Herzenberg, to come talk with us. He's the executive director of the Keystone Research Center, and they're working on a project right now to maybe talk about what that's going to look like. Steve, thanks for taking time for us.
Happy to, Rick.
So half the job's going to be gone, and we're all just going to be standing around with nothing to do except watch the robots work.
No, that's exaggerated, and that particular Oxford study is a little bit silly. But like with lots of things, in the end, we don't really know exactly how much artificial intelligence or robot, how many jobs are they gonna?
They just kind of guessed. Okay.
Yeah.
What about the fast food industry? Because we're told don't ask for that $15 in a union because, hey, we've got Flippy the hamburger flipper, or we've got the kiosks that are going to be in every McDonald's in the next couple of years, and all those jobs will be gone, and kids won't have jobs anymore, Steve.
Yeah, no. So, again, everyone's crystal ball is really foggy, right? So the guys at Oxford, other academics, nobody really knows exactly the scale of these impacts or the time frame of these impacts. It is, there are reasons to think that, artificial intelligence, which is computers get more and more powerful, and they now have what they call machine learning, where, machines actually can teach themselves to be smarter. If you show them enough, pictures of, radiological exams of patients, right? And you show them a picture, and then you tell them what that diagnosis was, right? So they can actually draw a set of inferences. If you throw them hundreds of thousands of actual cases, right? The machines can, if you show them another one, they might do better than a typical radiologist. So there are a bunch of specific domains or specific kinds of jobs where people have a particular narrow set of responsibilities that machines over time are going to do more of the work. But the issue, as always, is how are we going to manage these changes, right? So, again, at one level, when machines do the work, that's not always bad, right? From the trucking industry, right? People talk a lot about driverless vehicles or automated vehicles, right? Well, for those folks who are driving 70 or 80 hours to earn $50,000 or $60,000 a year, enough to maintain their income and support their family, man, if you could have the automated vehicles do half of that work, and they could then work 35 hours a week and make, the same 50 or 60 grand, then that'd be awesome, right?
That would be awesome. But what I know, Steve, is if that were to happen and you did drop from 70 down to 35 and you were making 50, you're going to end up probably making 20 on the other side of it.
Well, so in the end, what we're really saying to each other is that, like always, distribution matters enormously. So a couple of basics here, which is some of the claims about how quickly technology is going to do all the work are silly. They're exaggerated. We've heard these before. Number two, some of these technologies are new, and so they might have a broader impact than some of the past technologies. So there are going to be impacts. Right. But again, the upside of those impacts is when machines do the work, it's called productivity growth. So again, that gets us to that third point, which is it's all about distribution. And
Right.
so you and I both know that the last 40 years, distribution in the U.S. has been horrible. We keep getting richer and richer. Productivity keeps going up about 2% a year every kind of 35 years, or over the past 40 years. We've more than doubled how much each worker produces per hour of work. But basically, lots of workers haven't seen really a penny of that, right? So in the end, it's like if we're going to have machines doing lots of the work, it could be cause for celebration, could be higher incomes, could be shorter work time, could be more time with family, but if we do as badly as we've done in the last 40 years in terms of who gets the money, then it's going to be ugly, and we're going to have more inequality and, more rich people controlling our democracy because they have most of the wealth. And so, that's the issue. It's not about technology is not in the end going to determine technology by itself doesn't have good or bad effects. It's how we our political system, how we manage the impacts of technology.
Yeah, and look, I'm not a Luddite, but even me, I look at the scanner at the grocery store. I won't use it because I'm afraid that's going to put somebody out of work, because we're not doing well by people who are replaced by technology. We've got trade adjustment assistance where if someone loses their job because of a bad trade deal, we help them with education and wages to make sure that they can make it through their education process. But if technology, kicks you out on the curb, there's nothing. Sorry, progress just ran over you.
No, that's right. So again, the example you just gave, and trade adjustment assistance was kind of invented when we started to lose manufacturing jobs,
right?
And it's all great to get 2 years of unemployment insurance or up to 2 years of training, but if the only jobs you can get pay only half as much as the manufacturing job you used to have, that sucks.
So what's the answer then?
Well, so I mean, the answer is in the end politics and organizing. It's I mean, there's and one tiny upside is that in these debates about technology, there are some folks, like Silicon Valley entrepreneurs with a conscience, who are actually worried about people being left without any paid work, right? Worried about the social consequences. So they're talking about everybody getting a certain amount of money regardless of whether they're working, right?
Guaranteed minimum incomes.
Yeah, universal. That's right. What's called universal basic income. So again, there's at least a debate about should we, don't we need as a society, especially as we get richer and richer with the machines doing more and more of the work, don't we need to make sure everybody has some level of income, right? So that's not, I mean, that's a debate.
Well, it's an old debate. I mean, you go back to Milton Friedman in the 70s and his idea of the negative tax, and it's the exact same thing. And from his argument is we need consumers. If you're going to make all this stuff, who's going to buy it?
Well, no, that's fair, you're right, because again, I mean, it's already true that the top 1% gets 20% of the income and 40% of the wealth, and so if you go up a lot from there, you're right. There's no middle class to consume things, but the good thing about that, in a way, is that even the businesses have an interest in the end,
right?
Getting the distribution half decent. So yeah, someone will buy their stuff.
So what would it be? I mean, let's say for instance, we use what I know as the trucking industry. Let's say you take those long haul truck drivers who are making $50,000 a year, and you give them what? I mean, they're going to be out of a job. What do they end up with? I've heard people say, well, $1,000 a month, $1,500 a month guaranteed income.
Yeah, but
that's not going to replace $50,000 a year.
No, it's not. But again, in the end, that's not where I would go. I mean, universal basic income, maybe somewhere way down the road, but there are a bunch of other policies you could do. I mean, trucking, right? So there was a New York Times editorial this weekend, right, which talked about what's happened in trucking and the collapse of wages over the last 40 years, and again, it's about things like the misclassification of drivers as independent contractors. It's also about drivers not being paid for all that time they're waiting for the next load.
Right.
So, I mean, again, we could use technology we track where drivers are now. It's a trivial. We actually have electronic. We're supposed to now not have hard copy books logging how many hours people drive and whether or not they're violating the rules about how many hours you can drive in a week.
No, the computer does an amazing job of tracking where you are, how fast
so
you're
we
going.
Could use, so fine. So we could use that information to say people have to be paid for even the hours that they're waiting for the next load, right?
But someone has to force them to do that. I mean,
well, no, that's right. So that's why it's back to politics and and organizing and unless progressive politicians, unless workers in unions, they need to demand things like changes in the trucking industry, or other things they're demanding now, like higher minimum wage, or there's another set of debates now about, to my mind, a better alternative than, or more plausible alternative in the U.S. than universal basic income. So a certain amount of money, regardless of whether you work, would be some kind of public employment, option, right? So like a return to the Roosevelt's Civilian Conservation Corps, right?
Sure.
So in the so it's like, again, if you're worried now that there's not going to be enough market work, paid work from our market economy, then rather than having people starving and also people not using whatever talents and skills they have, can we put in place a public program that gives everybody the ability to a job and then an income linked with that job? I mean,
sure. No, look, I'm with you. I'm of the mindset that everyone needs a reason to get up in the morning, and I do believe in an honest day's work. I think there's therapeutic qualities to it. And I've always said, for over a decade on this show, that if the private sector can't or won't create enough jobs, the public sector has to step in and guarantee something and be the employer of last resort. And in the IA frame, I think there should be a technology cost to where if you do get rid of that truck driver, you pay that salary until that person would have naturally retired and moved on into taxes, so that they can then use that money to have a baseline to make sure that people don't go broke and aren't starving on the street corner.
Right. So we got to open up the debate with a whole range of ways you can spread the benefits of these kinds of technologies. I mean, there are now 3 presidential candidates, including Sanders, Cory Booker, I can't remember the third one, but who actually are supporting public employment options, things like the Civilian Conservation Corps. So again, that's a policy debate like universal basic income that nobody was talking about 5 years ago,
right?
But is now back on the screen, partly because of these fears around technological displacement. So again, we've had since Reagan, the range of debate about what you're allowed to do to make the economy work better for regular people has been incredibly narrow, right? I mean, for the most part, we're supposed to all kneel down and pray to the market and
the invisible
whatever.
hand.
Yeah, all that, right. So again, the good news is, hey, when you've got suddenly people talking about public employment creation, the right to a job is the language people use. When you got people talking about universal basic income, at least that's sort of an opening up to the debate. And it's, again, we gotta go through that door. It's the beginning of a conversation, which is like, in the end, policies should be guided by what kind of society do you want, right? I mean, do you?
Yeah, but Steve, we don't want a bunch of lazy people with no opportunity. In fact, I just watched some woman read poorly on a Fox News clip. I forget what her name is, Trish Regan or something like that, where she was talking about, if we go down this socialist path where you want to take us to where nobody works and everyone gets free education and free everything, there's no opportunity and there's no incentive, and it's just we're going to be Venezuela, and it's going to be the end of America, and because we believe in entrepreneurship and we believe in opportunity and winners and not being losers.
Yeah, all right. So we got to win that argument with, again, I think more people now think that the rules are rigged against them, and they're
of course they
ready.
are.
Well, okay, so yeah. So this future of work debate, I still think. Well, a betting person would say, just like with climate change, a betting person at this point, the U.S. and global response, but led by the U.S. to climate change, has been nothing short of pathetic, right? So a betting person would say, if we do get, and we probably will ultimately, if we do get this new wave of technological change that does have machines doing a bunch of work that they couldn't do in the past, they won't. I don't think they'll be doing caregiving for the elderly. I don't think they'll be doing childcare for kids, right? I mean, there are a bunch of things that involve that where people's ability to broad skills and understanding of context, and machines still don't think the way people do.
Not yet.
No,
I hope they don't. I hope they never do.
And I think, well, okay, the person I trust on these issues the most, who's working with me on this project, makes very clear that machines, don't have certain skills people have. And again, it's like machines follow a set of rules. So
right.
so the bottom line is you can, if you perfect the code for an automated truck to drive from Harrisburg to Pittsburgh, you can't then, that AI is not going to be able to fly a plane, or figure out whether or not somebody's stolen a credit card, or right. I mean, right. So these technologies can play Go, they can play chess, right? I mean, they can do things in specific areas.
Sure.
But what people are fantastic at is, I mean, one particular example that my friend John gives is actually people. Most people have never seen a deer, right? Where they're driving on a highway, they've never seen a deer jump in front of them. But actually, most people, if they see a deer, will know what it is, and will sort of know how to react, and maybe they'll get it right, maybe their reflexes aren't good enough. But actually, machines can't do that.
Right.
I mean, machines, the truck can avoid the deer because you've shown it lots of deer, and or you've shown it the kid running into the street after a soccer ball, right? So again, the way the machines do it now is still different than the way we do it, which
sure.
Again
if a deer jumps out in front of me, I'm going to run into it. If a kid runs out in front of me, I'm going to try and avoid it.
Well, okay, and it depends how far the deer is, and you'll make it. Actually, people will make, even if you've never done this before, you'll actually make a judgment about whether.
I've done it before. In fact, I hit one deer and 6 more hit me. So because
well,
one came and behind it were a whole bunch more.
Right. But part of what I am saying is, again, that machines are incredibly powerful and computers are more powerful with every single year. But the human brain is this miraculous thing. And
no, you're right. And to highlight your point, and I think maybe a little bit better example is a friend of mine explained that in Japan there's a 72-room hotel, and it has 5 people who work there. Okay. Everything else is done by automation. The rooms are cleaned automatically. The bathrooms are self-sanitizing. Everything is done by computer, or you check in with a computer animation thing.
Right.
Like you'd go to one of the poker screens at the casino. The only time you deal with an actual human being is when there's a problem, when there's a complex problem that a machine isn't going to be able to answer.
Right.
My problem, though, is look, there's a hotel here with 72 rooms that probably at one point would have employed 30 to 40 people, now just 5. That's where my problem becomes. And you're right. People are never, I don't think, ever going to be completely outdated or useless. But there'll be fewer of us needed. And that's where I think a lot of people who have diminished skills or, aren't going to go back to school in their 50s to get a crummy job. I think that's where the concern is.
That's fine. But I also think it's up to us, it's up to our side to sort of lift up the positive possibilities. Like, again, in addition to higher income, because machines can suddenly do all this work.
Right.
The other part of it is shorter work time.
No, I'm with you. And labor should have been pushing, back in the 50s, they were pushing for a 24-hour work week.
Yeah. And again, my reading of history is partly that organizing and political success are partly driven by possibility. So people rallied around the New Deal partly because they were desperate and starving, but also because they thought that, organizing unions that could lift workers' wages, having a minimum wage, having unemployment insurance so that the people without a job could spend something, having Social Security so that old people could spend something, right? There was a set of ideas then that, people were both in pain, but also knew or thought that there might be a way out of this that Roosevelt has articulated, right?
Right.
So again, it's like, to me, part of our messaging has got to be, hey, again, if machines are going to do a whole bunch of the work, and a lot of the work is work that people don't necessarily want to do. It's not all like deep pit coal mining or rote factory jobs where, again, as long as people aren't going to be left starving, people don't necessarily want those jobs. So some of the machines are going to do some routine accounting work, routine legal work, routine medical work, that's actually fairly well paid and fairly, quote, highly skilled, but still a lot of the machines they're more likely still to be doing the stuff that nobody would really rather do, except that it's the only way they could put food on the table.
Yeah.
Right? And so again, it's back to, we need to paint a positive and practical picture of, the AI economy for all that we could have. And then, we need to create it in Seattle and San Francisco and Boston.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And I'm looking forward to this happening because, look, we're not going to stop it. And this is where I try and explain to people, you're not going to stop. The ball's already rolling down the hill. It's a matter of how we manage that ball rolling down the hill.
Right. And if we let, again, the right and the neoliberals are all set with their story about even more of the money going to a tiny fraction at the top. It's because they're the ones with all the ideas, right? They're the ones that generated this technology. They're just getting their just reward.
Yeah,
and
they're the producers.
What?
They're the producers.
Yeah, and that's right. And so the people without a job, the parasites, the people with no skills, it's just unfortunate, but that's just, the economy works by giving people the rewards they deserve, right? And that's, again, that's a complete pile of nonsense. All of these technologies are built on a foundation of public investment,
yep.
Right? The internet comes from U.S. defense spending more than anything else, right?
Yeah, and I've had someone tell me all the things that came out of NASA. Public investment, has done wonders for the private sector. I just think a lot of people are a little worried, and I'm one of them who's a little bit worried as well. But this is a fascinating topic. I would love to pick this up again another time because this isn't going away, and I'd love to hear what comes out of your project, the report, and what kind of response you got.
Cool. Happy to come back.
Good stuff. Steve, I appreciate the time. Always good talking with you.
All right. Take care.
Our good friend, Dr. Stephen Herzenberg, Executive Director there at the Keystone Research Center. Interesting and good stuff. Quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people.
Firefighters, my friend, and the kids locked in the Capitol are fighting till the end. And we're not gonna break tonight, and we're not gonna bend. Some say the union's down, but I asked around, and everybody said, this is a union town, a union town. All down the line, this is a union town, a union town. All down the line, and if they come to strip our rights away, we'll give them hell every time.
This is a union town, all down the line. Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1989. That was the day that Jerry Horgan was killed while walking the picket line. Jerry was a chief steward for the Communication Workers of America Local 1103. The communication workers were on strike against telecom giant NYX Corporation, which became part of the present-day Verizon company. At issue was management's proposal to shift a greater share of the healthcare costs onto the backs of workers. The strike wore on for a total of 17 weeks. In total, nearly 60,000 telephone workers in the Northeast participated in the walkout. These included both CWA members as well as members of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Jerry Horgan was part of the strike in the town of Valhalla, New York, about 25 miles north of New York City. Jerry was struck by a vehicle driven by a strikebreaker while walking the picket line. The driver was the daughter of one of the company's managers. She was never charged for hitting Jerry, although some at the scene claimed she accelerated after hitting him with her car. One witness, Charles Pierce, recalled that Jerry was run down like a dog. The CWA honors Jerry's memory by wearing red t-shirts. In 2010, a CWA article titled "Why We Wear Red" explained, quote, "The idea started small. We asked our members to wear red on Thursday to remind the company of the blood they had spilled and to show support for our fallen brother. But it quickly spread nationwide as a sign of solidarity every Thursday at CWA locations. Jerry Horgan was killed standing up for the rights of workers and fighting for a better tomorrow for all workers. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery for this war is won your battle.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. I love having those conversations about, futuristic stuff, the AI, the coming of all of that technology that's going to replace all of us. And look, I'm all in favor of it as long as, we get to share in the spoils. And one of the things I forgot to bring up with Steve is, how we redistribute all this stuff. You do it with a tax code like they did before. Remember, during the Eisenhower era, top marginal tax rate was 92%. And even under Reagan, when Reagan took office, it was 70% before he dropped it all the way down to 28% and caused a massive recession and huge deficits and huge debt. Kind of have to remember that. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We'll be back tomorrow, Friday, taking a day off. Kids are already going back to school. Summer just blew right on by. I'm going to spend Friday with the kids before they have to go back. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together.